Welcome back to another Storytime video here on the very unofficial travel guides. I'm assuming this isn't going to be the first of my videos that you're watching, but if it is, normally I show videos about me traveling around the world to popular and not so popular tourist destinations, and I've started a new series, this series, which is my Storytime videos. In last week's video, I talked about the story of flying first class on Delta and how I was kind of disappointed, and especially comparing it to flying economy class on Emirates, that it was just a big joke. A couple weeks before that, I had posted a video about working out and basically getting fired from Six Flags Great America in Chicago back in my college days. And I've got some more details about that, and so that's what I'm going to talk about today. Locking myself in my room and bawling my eyes out. If you watch the video linked in the description below, you'll see that when I was in college, I was a musical theater performer at Six Flags Great America in a show called Crime of the Century. And for me, it was like a dream come true job for so many reasons, and I'll tell you some of them now. I had been doing theater since I was a kid. The first time I went on stage was when I was 10 years old in a local theater where I grew up, and I knew from a very young age that that's what I wanted to do with my life. I loved performing, I loved entertaining people, and it just seemed like the right thing to do. So all through high school, I performed in theater, and if I wasn't on stage, then I was almost always also involved in some form backstage. I also went to college for musical theater, and that is basically how I earned my living. My whole life was doing musicals in the United States and around the world on tours, and for the past, oh my gosh, how long have I lived here? 19 years, 18 years here on continental Europe, mostly in Germany. That's a whole other story, and that has nothing to do with traveling, so I'm not going to talk about that here. Maybe I should start a second YouTube channel. Anyways, back to the topic at hand. If you watch the video in the description below, like I said, you'll see I worked at Great America, and I had seen this show the summer before I worked there. It had already been running, and some friends that I was going to college with were in the show, so I went to see it, and I thought it was absolutely amazing. Like, it combined so many things that I loved. Working in a theme park, singing and dancing. And the production quality was so fantastic. There's just, I don't think hardly any theme parks nowadays produce shows at that level like we were doing back then in the 90s. Except for maybe Disney and Universal, but other Six Flags parks and Cedar Fair parks and the big chains, they just don't do it anymore. And I think it's because it's not really a reason to visit for guests. Anyways, I remember going to the audition. It was in a hotel close to the park, and there were other people that I was going to school with, and I think we had to sing first, and I sang my song, and then we got called back to do some dancing, and I did that, and then we were called back again on the same day to do some acting and some improvisation. And I remember feeling like it went really well, but for some reason assuming that I wasn't gonna get it. There were a lot of really talented people there, and there were also people there who had worked there the summer before, and I just assumed it wasn't gonna happen. So fast forward, I don't know, end of that week probably, and I remember coming home from class and having a message on my answering machine, back then there were no cell phones, from David Carter, who was then the head of entertainment, I guess, that I should call him back because he wanted to talk to me, and I was like, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh. And I called him, and he offered me the job, and I honestly don't think that I've ever been so happy to get any job in my life, ever. I was totally ecstatic, and I don't think anything in my life has ever made me as happy as that moment. I can honestly say that. And I mean that like in a good way, not in a like nothing ever has been that great since then. It was just like, that was a moment in my life that I was just so happy about. And the rehearsal started then several weeks later in the spring, because that was definitely in the middle of winter. I want to say it was like December or January. And it was tough because we had to rehearse on the weekends because everybody was in college. I had a class on Friday, I think finished at 1 o'clock. And I would get in my car and drive from Stevens Point, where I went to college, down to Gurney, which was like 3.5 hours. And then we would rehearse Friday evening, all day Saturday, and then Sunday until like 5 o'clock, I think, or 3 o'clock maybe. And then I would drive 3.5 hours back to go to class on Monday morning. And that went on for like 2.5 months until we started performing the show on one of the opening days, if not opening day, which is always in end of April or beginning of May, I think. Like spring. And here's something that was kind of challenging for me. I was really excited about this job, and it, like I said, it was like a dream come true. I remember seeing it the summer before and thinking, I want to be in this show, and I'm going to work really hard to make it happen. And then it happened, and I assumed that all the other people who were going to be working on this show were just as excited about it as I was. And like so often in my career, and I would assume in any job, that was not the case. And I know that some of the people who I worked with now are going to be watching this, and I don't mean to to criticize them because I know that I was really intense about it. But what I mean is, for some people, it was just like a job that they were happy with, and they would have much rather been doing that than a job that wasn't involving performing. But for me, it was like I said, a dream come true. And so there was sort of like a difference there. And I kind of feel like my enthusiasm for some reason made me kind of an outsider, which I understand now. But at the time it was hard for me because like when we would get breaks, I would usually just keep rehearsing on my own, and everybody else would go get a drink of water, and some would go out for a smoke or whatever, and I would just continue rehearsing just because I loved doing it so much, and I wanted to learn it as fast as I could so I could be as good as I could be for the shows. Like I said, that made me kind of an outsider, but over the course of the summer, we all bonded so closely and in a way that I've rarely experienced with a group of people on any of my other adventures that I've been on. There's very little that would compare to the amount of fun and drama that we had that summer. I'm trying to think of some good examples. Well, for one thing, how many guys were we? We were like 7 or 8 guys in one dressing room and 7 or 8 girls in the other dressing room. And I guess I can't think of any example that would be appropriate to talk about here, especially not without the permission of the people involved before I tell it. But I know that one thing that became difficult for me is that, like I said, I was really enthusiastic about the job and I wanted to be there every day. And it became difficult for me because a lot of the other people working there they just got sick of it really quickly. And then that was a topic that they talked about, is how much they didn't like being there. And it was tough for me because I loved being there. And then I felt like I was uncool because of that. And you were only cool if you found it terrible to be there. And that just doesn't make sense to me. And I have encountered that kind of attitude on so many jobs I've done around the world. And I don't know if it's just a theater-related thing, or for people who are watching this who don't work in the entertainment industry, do you encounter that a lot in your field? People who work hard all their lives to get this specific job, and then when they have the job, they just complain about how awful it is. It just doesn't make sense to me. It's counterproductive. It doesn't bring you anything, and it's especially not good for the people around you. It does nothing good. And that's something I struggled with. And ultimately, that's one of the reasons why that led to us all getting fired. And I say getting fired, and it's not like we were like all called to the office and said, you guys are fired. It happened a little bit differently than that. And now that I've made the video and gotten back in touch with some of the people, I can tell you more about what happened. Towards the end of the summer, because we weren't filling the theater as much as hoped, the management had apparently, and I don't remember this is what somebody that I worked with has told me since then, management had asked us to start doing some extra things in between the shows in order to help out with administrative things and also to sort of do advertisement for the show. And I wish I could remember it, but I don't. I do remember that at one time they had printed a whole bunch of flyers with a showtime on the flyer that we weren't doing. So it was planned that we were going to do a show at, like, I don't know, 11, 12:30, 3, and 5:30 or something like that, and they decided we weren't going to do any more 11 o'clock shows. They were going to shorten the schedule, maybe to shorten the hours. I don't know why. But for one weekend, there was a huge box of these flyers in the green room, which is like the break room in the theater, and they asked us to, when we had time, to sit down, and there were magic markers, and we were just supposed to cross out all the 11 o'clock shows because they couldn't give away these flyers in the park with a showtime on it that wasn't going to be performed. And I was like, okay, no problem, I can do it. But a lot of the other people I was working with were like, no, I'm not doing that. That's not part of my job. I'm here to sing and dance, and I'm not crossing out any show times. And I can understand that thing, but to me, it wasn't a big deal. And so that also created a little bit more drama. And I don't know, I feel like, and I was also a part of this, it was also contagious. We started to find ways to, I don't know, make things complicated and dramatic. If there was any reason we could find to not do a show, especially the nighttime show, then we would find it. The nighttime show was optional because if it was bad weather, we couldn't do it because there were a lot of characters in the show, and if it was raining, they shouldn't be outside because of the costumes. And the stage was, it wasn't like a real stage floor. It was part of the park during the day. It was that hometown square, like the stairs up to get on the train. And then there was like a platform there, and that's what was the stage. And it was concrete, and it was a little bit crooked. So if it was wet, it was really dangerous, and we couldn't and should not have danced on it. But so we would literally do rain dances with the hope that it would start just slowly, slightly drizzling so we could be like, oh, can't do the show, gotta go home early. And to me, that was hard because, like I said, I loved doing the show and I wanted to do it every day. If they would have told me, Morgan, you don't have to take a day off this week, I would have had no problem with that. But that was something that was hard for me and very dramatic, is trying to fit in and be cool and be like, yeah, it's raining, we can't do the show tonight. Whereas inside I was like, oh gosh, it's raining and we can't do the show tonight. I was always disappointed when we couldn't do it. These little things, these little drama things, I don't know, I felt like there was more and more and more, and the reaction of the cast as a whole became more and more aggressive and destructive. And this is what I also learned since I made the last video. There were two guys that decided they needed a week off before they went back to school. And they basically said, if you can't give us this whole week off, we're going to quit anyways. Which I don't think is a cool thing to do, but I don't know, who am I to judge that? So that created kind of like a scheduling problem, because I know we had gotten people to replace them. The plan was that they were not coming back. And I know that people were brought in to replace them. And it was one guy who was doing another show in the park, who sort of knew the show anyways, and it was really easy to put him into the show. And then it was a guy who did the show the year before. And he, of course, was really easy to get rehearsed and put into the show. And then here's something that I don't remember at all. Another one of these facts that I've learned since then. These two guys who were leaving, they requested to come back and do like one last day. And on that last day, there was another guy whose parents were coming to see the show. Because those two guys had requested that to be their last day, this guy whose parents were coming to see the show, he couldn't play that day because one of those guys was playing his part. You know what I mean? And that created another huge drama, and it ended with then this one guy whose parents were coming walking out. He said, you know what, I've put up with too much this summer and I've invested too much in this place to be treated like this, and I'm done. And I guess I can understand being that frustrated, and he basically left in the middle of the day, and that was, I guess, his last day. And because of that, and because he wasn't coming back and the other two people were leaving, the management quickly realized, well, we don't have enough people to feasibly do this show until the end of the summer, and there's not enough budget to do more auditions, do more rehearsals, get more costumes made. And so there was a meeting where they called us into the green room. I'm assuming it was there because I'm piecing together memories. Called us into the green room, and they basically informed us, because of the way things have happened, the last day that this show will be played is, I don't know what it was, August 3rd. And after that, I'm sorry, but we don't have a job for you all anymore. And like I said, I don't remember that moment exactly, but I remember going home to where I was living that day after finishing work, after finishing the nighttime show, if we did it, if it wasn't raining. And I remember locking myself in my room and bawling my eyes out. I literally cried myself to sleep. And I think I called my mom and I told her in tears what had happened, and that I was going to be going back to Minnesota early to spend the last few weeks of the summer before college started again. And I was really, really devastated. Like I said, it all started out as such a dream job to me, and it ended so abruptly, and it ended, the way it ended was so out of my control. And I feel like if we had been less dramatic, there would have been a way to do it until the end. But I can also totally understand that the management was so frustrated with us that they were like, let's just get this over with. Like I said, if more people in the cast had been like I was, and been like, you know what, we'll find a way to make it work, and I'll postpone my day off until that week, and then I can learn that part, and then do that song really quickly, and then it'll all work out. But we had gone through so many changes, and so, like, one after the other, people sort of leaving, and then setting up these other stipulations, and yeah, I can understand why it happened, but I remember that that was probably one of the worst days of my life. If getting the job was one of the best days, losing the job prematurely and having no say in the matter was an awful, awful experience. I think that I only stayed then down there by Chicago where I was living for another couple days, and I packed up all my stuff and I moved back to Minnesota to stay with my mom for the last few weeks of the summer. And then I ended up doing something that was also a dream job of mine, and that was I worked on a roller coaster crew for the last 2 weeks of the summer. So that was something really cool. But for me, it was such a slap in the face from going from being in entertainment in this great show, being the highest paid seasonal employees in the park, to working on a roller coaster crew, where that is hard work. You're standing all day long in the sun. At night, the mosquitoes come out. That's really hard work. And that's definitely not the way I had planned my summer would end, but I enjoyed that as well in its own way. And then, of course, I eventually went back to college, and the rest is history. And that's my story time. This has become much longer than I thought it would be when I set out to do this. And it gives you a little bit of insight about what it was like to work in a theme park. That was my experience. And actually, in case you don't know it, I also worked as a character parade performer and a dancer at the Magic Kingdom at Disney World in Florida. And not long after working at Great America, I took a half a year off of college to do that. So if you want to hear a story time or some story times about there, because there's some interesting stories about that too. I almost got fired from there too, and there it was definitely my fault. So if you want to hear that story, and you've watched this video to the end, then be sure to write that in the comments below. Thanks for watching this Storytime video. Subscribe to my channel here on YouTube, follow me on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and I will see you next week. Bye-bye.